Ben Wightwick, welcome to Legal Practice Intelligence.
Thank you, buddy. How are you? You well?
Yeah, great. It's actually been a while since we've chatted. You've got quite a large and varied background in terms of legal technology. So a lot of people in the UK know you. A number of folks in the US and Australia know you as well. So you're a bit of a brand out there.
No, I don't know if I'm a brand. I don't know how good the brand is if I am a brand, if that makes sense. But yeah, no, I've been around a bit. So yeah, no, it's great to be chatting to you today.
Have you seen the latest news? There's Australia's actually opened on the 21st of February.
I have seen that. Yeah, no, it's good. I don't know if I'll be making it on the 22nd of February, but yeah, looking forward to scheduling my next trip down there. So it's good.
Fantastic. So for the folks out there, and there'll be very, very few who don't know you, I mean, do you want to give a bit of an introduction about yourself and your background and I guess what you've been up to and where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So I spent 10 years at a company called HighQ. And a collaboration platform, and they were acquired by TR probably about 2.5, roughly 3 years ago. I had done a variety of roles within HighQ. I was part of the product team for a long time. I was part of the customer success organization, looking after our customers. And I spent a lot of time thinking about sort of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to progress myself, I guess, in that sense, and what I wanted to focus in on. And last summer, I managed to convince my wife that I would be allowed to take the summer off. I got a pass and I managed to sort of take the summer off. And I had no real plans in terms of direction of travel. I knew what I was really interested in. I was really interested in how technology is becoming not just a place for records of documents and things that sort of exist, how technology is intersecting within the actual practice of law, if that makes sense. So spending a lot of time thinking about how workflows, automation, and tooling around that can complement a lawyer's sort of armory in that sense, in terms of what are they doing, what are they focusing in on, how do we get sort of technology to do the boring commodity stuff and get the lawyers doing the really interesting. So during the summer, I spent quite a lot of time looking at decision tree platforms and workflow automation platforms. And I was lucky enough within HighQ to know a lot of the vendors out there. Yeah. And I sort of pinpointed Autologyx as one of the companies that I wanted to speak to. And I think the sort of the interesting thing about Autologyx is exactly where that sweet spot was, where I was interested in terms of the work product and where people go to do stuff and how that gets done and how do you plan that and what do you do around efficiencies and productivity. But I think the two things that stuck out about Autologyx was the product roadmap, their vision, what they want to do, and how I might be able to sort of complement that and work towards those objectives over the course of the next couple of years. But also the people. It's just one of those things. It comes back to how do you sort of see yourselves fitting into an organization? How will you add value? I didn't really want to just take a job to take a salary. I wanted to fit in. And I was often quoted when I was working for HighQ that if you cut me, I'd bleed HighQ blue. I was very passionate about HighQ, what we did and what we believed in. I saw that potential with Autologyx. So it was a fairly easy decision in that respect.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think last 2 years, I mean, gosh, the whole movement from, I guess, some organizations, partly paper-based digital to fully digital and remote working and those kinds of things have actually really, they've been catalysts for a lot of legal technology suppliers to actually, I guess, make their products more cloud-enabled, look at work from a more deeper sort of way.
Yeah, 100%. I think you look at the pandemic and how it's changed how people are operating and working. There has been a tremendous amount of movement and sort of disruption in this kind of environment, sort of the meeting space. How do you interact with your team? How do you maintain corporate culture? How do you maintain customer contact? What do you do? I think that's driven a lot of stuff. I think it's fairly superficial though, in terms of how it's being used. It is just the replacement for being face-to-face, which isn't superficial. It's important, but I think now in the next 5 years, that focus on how work gets done, who it gets done by, managing that, orchestrating that, delivering that for customers, being transparent about what that looks like. The whole LPM movement, but on steroids, I think that's where things are going, if that makes sense. And I think at the moment we're all I mean, every IT CIO out there has done an amazing job in the last couple of years, getting everyone sort of collaborating a bit more and focusing on that. But I think that will sort of start to sort of move on from that as it's sort of Teams and Zoom and everything else has become ubiquitous with sort of the daily sort of practice of whatever you're doing. But I think the extension of that is looking at truly how you're servicing your clients, what mechanisms are you doing that to make sure that it's profitable, it's efficient, it's productive, how are you using the right tools, how are you using the ecosystem. And I think the legal technology space, there are so many tools out there, so many tools out there, and some are platforms, some are point solutions, some are point solutions that want to be platforms, some are platforms that want to be point solutions. And I think there's that whole mix of trying to sort of belong. And I think that whole world and what's happening is only going to accelerate, grow. There's going to be a whole bunch of acquisitions and changes and investments over the next couple of years. But I think if you narrow it down, it is going to be about how you're getting work done, how you're sharing the knowledge that's within the environments that you work in, how do you collaborate more effectively. But equally, I guess the overriding piece across that is how do you do that in an open, transparent way to make sure that the customer feels part of the team rather than just sort of the recipient of the end product? How do you bring them closer? How do you deliver that whilst making them part of that? So I think that's a big part of what I'm seeing, but equally a big part of where I see Autologyx helping sort of solve some of those problems and what it's trying to do. So we're not there yet by any stretch, but that's where I see us playing a really important role for our customers and our customers' customers.
So is Autologyx then more about, is it solving more the problems around I guess client service and providing better client service, or internal, or is it basically both?
I mean, it's one of those things. It sounds a bit daft, but it's a platform that you can configure and use to solve processes that are unique to your organization, that are standardized in your organization. So we've got lots of customers that are using the technology for internal processes. Doesn't even go in front of a customer. It's just making something a bit more efficient. We've got other customers, law firms, for example, that are using the technology to solve specific problems for their customers, sort of outsourcing the technology, but also delivering sort of some of the new law capabilities of not just the technology, but also the lawyers and everything else within that environment. So it's one of those things that I talk to customers all the time. As Chief Customer Officer, I'm in front of customers all the time. I'm always listening and hearing what our customers plan to do with their customers as such. But it's really interesting how sometimes it's just a simple internal piece that sort of the light bulb moment happens. We could solve this problem, or we can integrate this internal system with that internal system and make our lives a bit more easier, or not invest in new technology because we've already got the technology inside the sweet spot, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a platform, but it's also, for many of our customers, it's just solving one or two problems. So
how would I guess if a CIO is looking at, I mean, as you said, there's a field of different solutions out there that people can look at and things. I mean, how do they narrow in and actually figure out what they want? And I guess when would they actually then, press the button or turn the key and look at your solution and put that in place?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think it always comes down to and I describe it sort of somewhat casually, but it's what's burning a hole in your pocket at that any one time. And that could be anything, really. I mean, it's a very similar story to the HighQ sort of environment where we had customers and we were known for doing 3 or 4 use cases really well. And then other use cases would be deployed across the top. I think Autologyx as a brand isn't where HighQ was in any way, shape or form. But it's the same sort of concept. I mean, we've got customers that are sort of do a lot around lease management, airline claims processes, or any kind of claims management tool set that you might think about, case management, matter management, legal intake and triage for corporate customers. So I guess it depends. It's hard because sort of I could describe 25 things and it could sort of resonate with a CIO or a COO or a CKO in terms of what we're trying to solve. I think we will end up talking about probably between 5 and 10 things that our customers are always doing with our technology, really honing in on that. But I think that the key to that is abstracting out the use case and talking about the features when it's appropriate. So thinking about how our visual modeler, so our sequencer, so thinking about it in its most simple form, think about Visio, joining the dots between sort of that, creating a pathway, but actually that being integrated into the bespoke data model that has been created in the platform. And thinking about how all of those sort of processes then create tasks, or start to think about how that gets presented on a dashboard, or produces documents, or integrates with iManage or Relativity or any of the other sort of ecosystem tools that are out there. It's the core capabilities. How do you present that? We used to say at HighQ that we used to talk about sort of Lego blocks. How do you bring the different Lego blocks? You could have all the Lego blocks in front of you, and you could build a car, you could build a helicopter, and you could build a speedboat. It doesn't really matter if that makes sense. It's about bringing together the capabilities to solve the business problem at hand. And I think that's why, coming from the customer success background that I had for the last sort of 4 years at HighQ, that's where Autologyx is. Hopefully I can sort of pay dividends within Autologyx, because it's about helping enable and educate our customers on the value that they can get from their existing license. So understanding how they can use the technology in different ways to solve different business problems. So I think that's a big thing for us in the future, about sort of the engagement with our customers, delivering that value, and taking and building out those key components and improving them and delivering against them, and everything else.
So I guess, I mean, it's interesting because the client success function almost like leads the sales charge. It's really more a consulting based kind of engagement versus in the first instance versus a pure knock them down, sell them sale type scenario.
100%. I mean, I've got a very, it's not different. I've got a very clear vision for the relationship that exists with customers for customer success. And I sort of compartmentalize how you engage with customers. And I always think about, in the same way that you'd have a sales organization, you'd have the sales guy, the AEX, and you'd have a pre-sales guy, and you pair them together. That's how you sell. That's how you sell stuff. You've got a dynamic. You've got Batman and Robin, and they're going out and they're doing different things, but they're working well, and they're delivering against the targets and everything else. Customer success and that kind of customer engagement is really important, but you've got a different set. You've got a different pair of roles playing. You've got the account manager who's responsible for renewals, invoicing, a little bit of support. But then you've got the customer success side, which is responsible for sort of expansion, education, enablement. And it's very quickly that sort of, again, Batman and Robin dynamic around who's doing what and engaging with the customer and sort of delivering that value. And I sort of always used to bang the drum that customer success in our world, where you're a SaaS business solving sort of many different problems, it isn't a revenue generating. You shouldn't have a target as a customer success sort of consultant. Revenue is a byproduct of doing your job well, but you shouldn't be sat there, because otherwise you're just going to sell what's there, and you just become a pseudo sales guy. You want the account manager doing that stuff, and you want to be the relationship, the sort of the confidant, the business partner on the other side, on the customer success side. And how do you deliver that? And you don't care about the revenue. If you're doing your job well as a customer success consultant, the revenue side of things will always happen, because people will look at you and they'll sort of call you up to solve the next problem. They won't go to market and try and buy a point solution. They'll come to you first and see if you can solve it. You're not always going to be able to solve it, but they'll come to you. And that's where the HighQ team did really well. And that's sort of what I'm currently hiring for a couple of roles at the moment. Whilst we're not calling them customer success, there's a big part of the culture and the ethos of the team that I represent now. It is focused on that sort of relationship, product experts, curious individuals, but really driving home that how can we be valuable to our customers? How can they derive value from what we do? And then everything sort of falls into place.
I mean, what a great mentor to have too, and yourself. I mean, I know, Ben, that you've actually worked with many organisations. There you go, a bit of a compliment, but you work with many organisations. I mean, you must have like a playbook of all the best practices that you've seen law firms across the world inside your mind.
Yeah, I mean, if I could write a book, I'd be rich. I wouldn't be, but you know what I mean? It'd be mostly pictures and crayons and stuff like that. I don't write well. But yeah, no, I mean, I spent 10 years at 11 years at CMS. I spent 10 years at HighQ. I took a little bit of a break. I've done 3.5 months at Autologyx. During that time, I've seen so much change in the legal market in terms of what people are doing, how they're approaching it, the offshoring, the nearshoring of legal work, organizations like Factor coming into play and Elevate and driving that whole new law company kind of model. What does that do to law firms? How does that sort of sit? How the big four are coming in and what they're trying to do, and their sort of breadth of technology and how that's sort of solving problems. It's really interesting. And I think the model that we as vendors sort of present, how we present ourselves to law firms, will always be sort of, we've got to be a bit of a chameleon, because I think that there's a lot going on. We can't pin ourselves down to being just one thing. And that's why the platform is key, if that makes sense. We've got to be able to talk different things to different customers. We've got to be able to talk different solutions, different use cases, but we've equally got to have the domain experience to be sort of credible, I think, in that sense. And hopefully, I know people will laugh at me, but hopefully I can bring a little bit of credibility to the ALX proposition around where we are and what we've done.
So if I look at your go-to-market model in terms of actually taking, I mean, what for me, that the knowledge you've got of these best practices, of the processes that people have got, I mean, it's more about, as you sort of say, an education type process. And actually, so you've not got salespeople sort of smashing the phones and getting people in for demos and things. It's more about the fact that we're putting these white papers out, we're putting this information out, we've got this, how do you build a business case around these processes and that kind of stuff. So it's really pulling people in to kind of look at more and actually build their knowledge up. And then if they like what they see, then they kind of then go with it.
Yeah, 100%. I think historically we've been, Autologyx has been sort of, they've presented themselves as sort of the experts. So not just in building product, but how do you re-engineer a process? What do you need to do? What are the considerations? A lot of our collateral and marketing sort of talk has gone into that stuff, because frankly, there's so little out there. And we're so, as I said earlier on in the conversation, we're really early on the work product of sort of legal in that sense, and work product in general. So how do you sort of take a process that's been in a lawyer's head or in the back of a fag packet for however long, with checklists and everything else? How do you convert that into a playbook that solves 50%, 80% of your claims solutions or your matter management solutions or whatever it might be? And sometimes that's quite difficult. So there is an education aspect to our sales cycle. It isn't just about Autologyx, it's Autologyx and the combination of, yeah, we know some stuff. We're actually quite, well, I'm not, but there are some very intelligent people in Autologyx. And we've got some great experience and great background. And I think it is a consultative sale. It is a thing that over time you start showing the technology, but you've got to get people to the point. It isn't just, oh, look at me, I've got a new way of presenting, and I'm going to say some stuff, but think about a point solution here or a point solution there.
Yeah.
It's a bit grander than that, which sometimes makes it harder to sell. It's a longer sales cycle, and I think that's the challenge that we have in terms of how do we refine that. We are a small team, so it's like how do we make sure that we're focusing on the stuff that's going to really resonate, and everyone. There's so much attention on sort of how this part of the market is changing. There are so many intelligent, articulate, and clever consultants out there, technologists and everything else. We've got to be able to stand up against the best of them, or stand alongside them and partner with them, because I think that's going to be this is going to be a key part of what we do and how we scale.
I was going to say, I mean, the partnering side would be, I mean, if I was a management consultancy in the legal world, I mean, this would be an ideal sort of platform to take in, work with, learn, and present to my clients, I guess. And equally also build IP from. I mean, I guess there'd be a facility for you to actually build templates, like workflow templates and things like that you could effectively then go and, create as your own IP and then basically sell those things.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of our customers have worked with us in that way, and they've solved a particular problem for one customer, and they've gone off, particularly if you look at the Eversheds Connexo guys, they're a long time sort of client of ours, and they've got a couple of solutions that they've used with a couple of customers, and they start to look at how that sort of that rinse and repeat model sort of works and operates. Our technology isn't quite there for the true templatization of what we do, but actually, how do we clone a template? How do we clone a process? How does that sort of represent itself? All of the pieces are there. I guess that's what's really exciting from a guy that's been a bit of a product, a bit of a customer success, a bit of a generalist, I guess.
Yeah.
During my time at HighQ, the product roadmap is really exciting at Autologyx, and we are due to launch a new platform or a new version of our platform in the summer, which it will be a game changer for us in terms of how we deliver our technology, but it will also be a game changer for our customers because it'll be 100% more accessible in terms of what they can do and how they do it, and truly deliver that sort of that platform, that scalable sort of entity that you can throw at a particular fire on a Tuesday, solve a problem by the Friday, and focus on the next thing. And I think that's the really exciting bit.
Yeah, interesting. So I've got a hard question for you.
Oh, no.
Here we go. So if you spend $1 on this solution, I mean, what kind of return do you think that somebody could potentially look at getting out of that?
That is a hard one for me to quantify in that sense. And I wanted to come armed with a whole bunch of data points and start to look at things. I guess what I will do is I'll reference one of our larger clients in terms of how they're using the platform. And so they're really on a growth spurt with us in terms of addressing sort of different problems within their business and sort of solutions and how that can be sort of represented. So one of our larger global insurance brokers as a customer, that if you take one of they're using our platform for 5 or 6 things, but if you take just one of them, they've taken a process that was 80% sort of manual work and replaced that, if that makes sense. And they've started to think about how sort of across their 3,000 to 3,500 renewals, how do they improve that workflow? How do they improve without throwing extra headcount at it? And what does that look like? And so there's a lot of things like that in terms of how do they improve it? What does that look like? I think one of the key things isn't necessarily the cost savings, and I think there's always going to be some kind of efficiency gain or productivity gain that comes out of a technology like ours. I think one of the real hidden values of this kind of thing, which is sort of your increasing governance and sort of therefore you're managing your risk a little bit better. There's a standard way of doing something and the output is standard and the controls are standard. That governance and compliance, especially in a very sort of regulated and a sort of highly compliant environment like insurance, professional services, legal, that whole sort of additional benefit to sort of the platform, I guess, is really key, and one that's really understated a lot of the time because everyone likes shiny figures. I mean, you wanted it from that question. You wanted, oh, yeah, I can save you £1 million from $1 investment. I can do this, I can do that. I think there's so many other metrics and points that you can refer to that actually sort of tie into the benefit of doing this sort of stuff. And that whole governance structure, knowing that sort of you're getting those efficiency gains, but actually the other gains that you're getting from that implementing that solution is pretty key as well.
Which I guess leads me into the point that effectively if someone's developing a business case for something like this, then there's a whole bunch of points of reference they can talk to you about from point of view of not features and benefits, but basically, real life, considerations around governance. I mean, I look at this and I go to myself, like, in a digital world, you've got more people working remotely. I mean, one of the key things I think is employee retention. Now, why would I say that? Because I think to myself that people are just, there's some people that just are not going to go back to the office again. They're really good people.
Yeah.
And they won't go back, and they want to work how they've been working, but you need the systems in place, the governance in place, and all the stuff that's in place to work anywhere in the world. And if they can't, they'll move. And the cost of something like that is actually immense.
Yeah, 100%. And I've watched and listened over the last couple of years, sort of the attitudes to fully remote, hybrid, back to the office, regional, this and that. And I think I was chatting to a very senior sort of part of the leadership team at a law firm in New York, and up until 2-3 weeks ago, the mandate was everyone's back in the office. And then all of a sudden Omicron happened and they're not back in the office. And I think the attitudes of individuals my age and younger will be, actually, I'm as valuable here as I'm as valuable being sat at my seat. I don't have to be sat at my desk to be productive. I don't have to be in the office. I've got a good friend who's spent the last year traveling. Well, he's been working for his company. He's done a little bit in Ecuador. He's done a little bit in Peru. He's done a little bit here. And it's like, there's nothing stopping, apart from the borders and the control around travel, there's nothing stopping people from doing that. And I think the technologies, and this is what I was referring to earlier on around sort of the rise of Teams and Zoom and everything else, it's become ubiquitous because it's had to, because people needed to connect. Yep. But it's not actually changing the way people work necessarily at a fundamental core level. They're still going to other systems of a record. They're still doing other bits and pieces. And I think in terms of how ALX plays in that, I mean, one of the selling points, even before I joined, for some of our customers, was actually, these are global organizations that are having to change, and that change is enforced a little bit and accelerated, but they were always on this digital transformation journey. How do they start to scale? I mean, everyone's been talking about digital transformation forever, but everyone's not really doing it, if that makes sense. And everyone now thinks that Teams and Zoom and everything else, it's like, yeah, we're done now, off to the next thing. And it's like, and I'm joking, obviously, but I'm not, in the sense that there's so many little processes, little bits of work that are fundamental to so many little organizations that somebody runs in a spreadsheet or somebody does here. And that's not knocking spreadsheets, but it's actually, how do you connect that to the wider workforce? How do you put that governance and compliance around it? How does that set aside what you can do so that you can be truly sort of remote, truly hybrid in that sense? And I think that's the key thing.
I'm going to get shot down for this, but I think that a lot of the, 10 years ago or even longer ago, people were kind of like offshoring things, taking things offshore and creating teams offshore, and it was this great cost-saving measure, and they were going to get the same customer service and things. But what wasn't there was the systems in place. There were not the systems. There wasn't the digital journey that the different organizations had gone through to get to the point where it was all joined up. But I think there's tools, there's glue in the middle that puts these things together. I mean, it sort of sounds like what you guys have got is actually part of that glue that sticks things together.
For some of our customers, it will be part of the glue. It won't be everything. I mean, we're a relatively small startup, if that makes sense. But and we're not an SAP, and we're not sort of playing with the big boys. But we've got customers that are deriving that kind of value from our technology today. And that, how do you scale that? What do you do in such a way that allows? I think one of the challenges that ALX have had over the years, and our customers will say this, is that it's been a bit too challenging for them to do themselves, because it is really thought-provoking, complex stuff, the data modeling and everything else. It's like, you could put me in front of a data modeling screen and I could start putting stuff in there, but actually, until you start working through that in conjunction with the sequencer, in conjunction with the workspaces, do you then try to realize, actually, the process that we've been doing for ages, and this is the classic thing, it's like, how do you reimagine a process rather than just implement the crap process you've got today digitally? You know what I mean? And that takes part of the education thing that we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. And it's really interesting. The point you made about sort of the offshoring and nearshoring of particularly in the legal world, where you've got people sort of doing work and they were looking for cheaper cost centers effectively, but the same sort of quality of staff. I think the technology is in place to to sort of start to deliver against some of those things now, whether it be ALX or something else. And Microsoft have made massive strides in terms of what they're doing. And I always sort of look at how I was using and implementing sort of Microsoft products when I was at Cameron McKenna through to where Microsoft now, and they've really transformed how they present themselves, what they do. There are things that with Teams that drive me absolutely mental, but there's other good bits about it. But I think the biggest thing, and I think this is a really key thing, whether you're a 25,000 employee large corporate like Thomson Reuters, or you're a 25 employee that's distributed globally like ALX. Technology is a commodity. It's that layer that connects people, but actually it's the corporate culture that keeps people where they are. It's the flexibility, it's the openness, it's the empathy, it's all of those things that come together that go, shit, I'm actually working for a good company, and I'm delivering against those things. And I think that is the hardest thing that any organization, whether you're a small startup, whether you're a big organization, that is the thing that they'll wrangle with the most over the next 5 years. It'll be, you talk about sort of people, the great resignation and everything else, and it sometimes it will come down to, my organization doesn't want me, or wants me in the office more than I want to be in the office, and I know I can get an equal job somewhere else. But actually, I think that the pandemic and sort of the rise of sort of mental well-being and mental health, and more people are talking about it, I think that's becoming, and it's essential to come into and be ingrained as part of corporate culture. And I'm seeing massive strides in that, and that's amazing. And I think that's the one thing that hopefully my team now here at ALX, they sort of see that, well, hopefully I'm not a tyrant, if that's the short answer. I'm trying to build that little bit of culture that says, you've got wiggle room. I mean, I've said this 100 times when I've tried to hire people, when they talk to me about the team, talk to me the stuff that I might do on a day-to-day basis. I'm like, well, you have some roles and responsibilities, but you're an adult. I'm not going to sit on your shoulder like a parrot and check what you're working on and how you're doing it. You're an adult. You're getting paid a good wage to do a good job. If you're not doing a good job, you'll get told that. If you are doing a good job, you'll get praised. But when you're not doing stuff, everything is like, we don't try and manage people. We try and lead people. How we work. What do we do? How do we present ourselves? Let's take ourselves a little bit. Let's make sure we don't take ourselves a little bit too seriously. Family is important, work is important, but family comes first. How do you create that ecosystem, that culture? And I think that'll be the thing. It won't be whether or not I can see you as my co-worker in another region. That'll be important, but it isn't necessarily the work product that will keep people in jobs. It will be your relationship with your co-workers and how you feel when you only see them once. I mean, I've only met 2 of my colleagues face to face once. I've not seen it. In 4 months, I've not met anyone. I'm seeing them next week, actually. And it's one of the things that since the turn of the year, we're putting a massive stride in, okay, we're a fully remote organization. How do we keep that connection going? And some of it is face-to-face engagement, but actually some of it is one-to-one chats, it's beers at the end of the day, it's whatever it might be. And how do we connect?
You said a magic word, I think, earlier on, which is empathy. I think the whole empathy situation, putting yourself and understanding where people are, I think that's the cornerstone of culture. I mean, people, it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. People overly use the word culture to actually describe a whole bunch of behaviors and things that are actually embodied. And I think to myself, like, it starts from a top, but it's defined by everyone through the organization, and everyone's got to live it and breathe it, and everyone's different. And I guess the situation is that empathy, and I've heard this loads of times. I mean, basically one common comment that I hear is around empathy. People understanding, people got families, and that sometimes workloads might be, there's peak times of workloads, there's different things that are going on and that kind of thing, and basically understanding. So I think systems in place give people that little bit of slack room and put more of a human side of things in, because all the routine stuff's just taken care of. That's going to go out. Those processes we follow, you just know it's going to happen because that's what happens.
It's going to be a really interesting sort of journey for organizations of all sizes over the next sort of 2 to 5 years, how we come out of sort of the new normal, what that means, What does it mean for your employees? What does it mean for your customers? And I think that we've got some new challenges to overcome, I think, as organizations, as a service delivery and sort of technology delivery sort of company like ours. How are we scaling to that? How are we challenging ourselves to be the best we can be? How do we present that without sounding too sort of airy-fairy and all that sort of stuff? And I think it's really important to be human and just realize when sort of you need help and ask and push that through and have that cultural sort of vision of, okay, making sure that we're doing the right thing by people. And I was chatting to somebody yesterday, and they were sort of asking about the role that I'm hiring for, and said, okay, what do we do, and how would we do it? And I said, it's going to be, if you want to work between 6 and 12 in the morning, because that's when you work best, you've got the flexibility to do that. Okay. It's sort of, there is no set sort of standards in terms of what we do and how we do it. And that's it.
So if I'm actually I'm a law firm or a company that basically says, look, I'm actually I want to kick some goals, and I've got a digital transformation sort of directive. I want to kick some goals, and I want to pick your brains. How do I do it?
Speak to somebody else at ALX. Don't speak to me. No.
The most humble person I know.
Honestly, just get in touch. I think there's a part of having been on the consumer side of technology within a corporation and having been on the vendor side. I think having a clear idea of what your business objectives are and what your objectives are around the business case is really key. We can help articulate that and support that, but a lot of the time, it's really about that education and understanding, okay, well, we've got this thing, how might you solve it? And there's probably 10 ways you might solve it, you know what I mean, with 10 different vendors. So, yeah, we're happy to talk to people about sort of, and we do this a lot, we workshop a lot with our prospects, because we want to make sure that they're understanding what we can do, but also what their problem is. And so it's about that discovery piece that's oftentimes. But yeah, so get in contact with us, with me at LinkedIn, Twitter.
Thank you so much for your time today.
No worries, bud.